a lot of men, they go into sex from like a state of anxiety, like what's my partner thinking about me? Is my dick too small? What if I ejaculate too? There's all this self-judgment, all this shame. And so just being able to release those layers and just enjoy yourself during sex, like that to me is tremendously healing. Just to be able to fully enjoy yourself during sex.
Life today is chaotic, unpredictable, and constantly shifting. But within the chaos lies opportunity, and we're here to seize it. This is Generation Uncharted. Johnathan White, good to finally talk to you. How are you doing?
Hey Lewis, doing well, man. Doing pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. Well, let's jump straight into it. The first thing I wanted to talk to you about is there is so much pressure on men, especially nowadays when it comes to our sexual energy. You know, porn is a big issue, but also just this idea that a man needs to always be sexually ready to go, like some sort of caveman. So I just wanted to understand from you, how do you feel that men's sexual energy is being hijacked?
Well, it's interesting because we live in a time where testosterone and overall sexual vitality is a very sharp decline. Like the average testosterone level right now is significantly lower than it was 10 years ago, which was significantly lower then than it was 10 years before. So there's this overall drop in fertility, testosterone, overall virility for men. And so, it's a deep subject, but I think kind of the short answer is that I think it's a combination of people's nervous systems being overstimulated, out of balance, a lot of stressors in the modern world, and also an unawareness of how to manage, for men, how they can manage their vitality, essentially, because we grow up in a world, well, even more in the current generations are growing up with such available porn, just all this sexual stimulation, and it's driving them to compulsively masturbate and ejaculate too much, in my opinion. And I think that has a negative effect, not just on mental health, but neurotransmitters of the brain and hormone levels. So I think one of the most important things as well is that men have become very disconnected from their bodies and this like organic embodied sexual experience. And it's been replaced by this very overstimulated mental, visual, fantasy, porn image. So it's like this experience of being overstimulated and almost pulled out of yourself instead of being able to really settle into your own internal experience.
A lot of stuff you said there, especially the thing about the nervous system. I personally have been doing a bit of self-discovery, and I've realized, even though I feel like a cool, calm, collected person, actually I think I've got a lot of sort of like just stress held in my nervous system, which is quite interesting. So talk to us a little bit about sexual kung fu then. What is it and how can it help?
Sexual kung fu is a term, the term kung fu we often associate as martial arts. What it really means, gong fu is a Chinese word. It basically translates to skill attained over training. So sexual kung fu is the skill of your sexuality, essentially, and even more specific in the context of what I practice is the skill in harnessing your sexual energy and using that as a force for better health, for creativity, and of course to have much better sex and better sexual experience.
So how would you describe what sexual energy is then to someone that's never really thought about sexual energy? It's just something that happens, isn't it?
Right. I mean, on the more physiological surface level, it's the excitement that gets generated in your nervous system when you're becoming aroused. Hormones are being released. There's biochemistry changes. We all feel that significant shift between just our normal daily life to being turned on. Something's changing there. And getting a bit more woo-woo or esoteric with it, there's this concept of life force, chi, prana. And the idea is that, even modern quantum science shows that our bodies are 99.9% empty space. Everything in the universe is mostly empty space. Like this physicality is an illusion. And so everything's like these vibrating energy fields. And the slower that vibration comes, the more close it becomes to physical matter. And essentially, energy exists in different forms, different frequencies, so to speak. And our sexual energy is a very specific one. According to the Taoist system, the sort of yogis of ancient China, which I studied in, they talk about our sexual energy. They call it Jing Qi, which is like the essence of the sexual fluids. They say that it has these very specific qualities, which I found to be true from my own experience, which is that our sexual energy is both an amplifier, like it's kind of cranking things up to 10, amplifying your emotions, obviously your pleasure when you have an orgasm, your love with your partner, but it can also amplify hatred and fear, negativity, addiction. And sexual energy also functions as a like a bonding agent, almost like a super glue, and it glues you to thoughts, it glues you to feelings and behavior. So when you understand these qualities of sexual energy, you can start to see how if you work with it consciously, instead of it just controlling your life, if you can direct this force towards the things that you want to direct it to, you can really amplify a lot of positive things in your life and bond yourself to very, very constructive patterns in your life.
That's really interesting. And actually, something you said there about sexual fluids, I did want to ask you about semen, because I think a lot of men just think, well, semen, we have an endless supply of it. What's so important about that? From porn to sex, most men, if they did not ejaculate, would think something wrong had happened. But you teach men that actually semen is special and we should think twice about just being careless with it. So why is semen so important?
Semen is a very concentrated substance in the body. It's funny because I know how controversial this is for someone we grow up around sexuality. It's like, yeah, it's just ejaculation. The doctor says I should do it a few times a week to keep my prostate healthy. It's just fluid releasing the body. But when you really look at the processes involved for the body to create semen, in Ayurveda, in the Indian traditions, they talk about it. The body goes through this whole process. It's like the body digests the food. The food turns into the blood, turns into the bone marrow. I'm kind of screwing it up, but it's something like this. And essentially, the semen is the most refined substance in the body. And our semen is, because the whole thing is that what's the most important thing on a biological level? It's to continue the species. So basically, your body's always putting its best resources into the seed, into the semen, to make sure that the species are able to propagate. And so it's going to put everything into it. And so essential minerals, there's enzymes, hormones, all these things. And so what happens is when you're ejaculating more than you're able to replenish, because my philosophy isn't that men can never, ever ejaculate. It's just understanding that it is costing you something. And if you do it too much, you become depleted. And so basically, it's like a bank account. If you're spending more than you're putting back in, it becomes empty. And what putting back in looks like is, of course, eating nutritious foods, getting rest, exercise, all these things to kind of build your bank account back up. But these things are becoming less and less common. Less people are exercising, eating healthy, etc. So what happens is that when the body's spending more than it can replenish, it starts to pull minerals and resources from the rest of the body, from the organs, from the spinal fluid, from the brain. And a very physiological thing that happens is after a man ejaculates, there's a hormone secreted into the bloodstream called prolactin. This is the same hormone that's released when women are lactating, they're breastfeeding, and it shuts their libido down. Same thing for men. We become temporarily impotent. We can't get an erection. We lose sexual desire after ejaculating. And so when you're frequently ejaculating, you tend to have elevated levels of prolactin in the bloodstream. So you feel much more lethargic, you have less sexual desire, your erections, you may have erectile dysfunction from this as well. And on a more esoteric level, the Taoists and a lot of other traditions as well, the Hindus, the yogis talk about this as well, where the semen is concentrated life force. It's almost like the spark, the potential for the life that's animating our bodies. And we only have a certain supply of it. And ejaculating is a major way that we lose this. And so once we spend more than we're taking back in, it's an accelerated climb towards aging and depletion, essentially.
What I like about you and a lot of what you've said there is I feel like you pull together a lot of science, but then belief systems from around different parts of the world at a time where I think more and more men are maybe rethinking what they know about sex and about sexual energy. And I think that, there's a growing movement at the moment with men of not watching porn. We're hearing younger generations are not into, quick, fast hookups like maybe some of the previous generations were. Do you think that there is a big shift now and people are more open to hearing about these different beliefs and sciences from around the world when it comes to sex and sexual energy?
I absolutely think there is more of an interest in this. It's funny, I got into these practices in my early 20s. This was 2013, and there was not much out there back then. And since then, the no-fat movement came around, and then semen retention has become a big buzzword throughout social media. So there's this definite increased interest in these practices. And I think it's a great thing. We're at a very interesting time where I think both technology and just I think people are just getting tired of the same old things, the same old stories, and we're looking for new ways to do things, new ways to evolve and experience life. And I think that this is one area that is much more men are becoming interested in. Absolutely.
And much more men are turning their back on porn altogether. So I'm assuming a lot of men might reach out to you with that issue. What do you say to men that are looking to abstain from porn?
Yeah, so it's an addiction. And I think this is also kind of what's caused this increased interest in semen retention and men understanding their sexuality more, is because porn is more available than ever. Like when I was growing up in the 90s, it was like I had to get on the family computer hooked up to the phone line, like dial up internet, and wait an hour to like try to download this 10-second pixelated clip. So it was a whole process, and the porn we had wasn't the highest quality, but now it's like a 10-year-old on a smartphone, can be just accessing all kinds of material, instant streaming, high definition, and it's just crazy. And I think that this is, again, just burning out men's nervous systems, like depression, sexual issues. Like they're marketing these ED drugs to men in their 20s now. So it's a sign that obviously there's a shift in the sexual health. And I think that's brought about this renewed interest in men understanding that porn is actually potentially damaging them in a lot of ways. So what I always tell men who are looking to shift away from porn is that you have to understand that it's an addiction, and when you're looking at porn, it's essentially hijacking your dopamine response. This is the reward chemical in the brain, and it starts to program in behaviors, because what's happening is you're watching porn, it's stimulating this release of dopamine, and it feels great, it feels fantastic. You want more and more. The more videos you watch, the more dopamine release you get. But it starts to desensitize your receptors. The body's saying, hey, like we shouldn't have this high of dopamine levels for this long. We're gonna like shut down the availability of it. And so you go back to your daily life and you feel really low. You feel depressed. You have anxiety. And another thing is like a lot of men develop what's known as porn-induced erectile dysfunction. When they're with their actual real life partner, it's not as stimulating as the like crazy porn they were watching, and they're unable to get erect. They're unable to enjoy sex, like even have orgasm potentially. And so obviously this must be corrected. So my advice is always, because it can be hard just to stop something, like, oh, I'm just going to quit cold turkey. For most people that just doesn't work. So my advice is always to find something else to put your energy into that's going to give you that natural dopamine release, but without overstimulating, without exaggerating it. Like it's a great time to have a hobby, some sort of creative outlet. Maybe that's learning a musical instrument. I think physical exercise is great, going to the gym, going for an exercise. And it's like whenever you have the desire to look at porn, go do something else. Go put your energy into something else like that. But on an even more around the realm of sexuality, I think once you experience a dynamic of sexuality that is more satisfying than what you've experienced through porn, I think that's really what's going to do it, because that's what did it for me. I was watching porn throughout my teenage years and early 20s, and it was getting into the sexual cultivation, the sexual kung fu, that I just completely let go of it, because I was experiencing what it was like to have this very embodied, deepened experience of pleasure, where instead of it just like this quick build up and then ejaculate out, okay, that's it, over with. Like in the system, we rewire the body so that we can experience full body pleasure, full body levels of orgasm for sustained periods of time. So after having that experience of just like this completely internal experience, just amazing pleasure, amazingly embodied and grounded, just going back to porn, it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel good for me. And so I naturally let go of it. So essentially, once men experience a more holistic experience of sexuality, they're often less likely to go back to more addictive outlets.
There's so much you said in that I totally agree with. I think it's interesting. Just starting with the porn thing, I almost think there needs to be another word for it now, because you're totally right. Back in the day, your dad's Playboy, that would have probably been considered porn. What these kids have got now is just insane. I mean, and they're talking now about, using virtual reality headsets, so you're sort of in the room. And if you think that your brain doesn't really know the difference between a screen and real life, like what you're saying is totally logical. But if there's a guy that's watching orgies all day long and his brain thinks that he's, having sex with hundreds of women a day, and then, he's then with his girlfriend, of course that's not going to be as arousing as what he was doing before. And interesting what you say about, full body sexual experiences being the way through, because I did want to ask about that, because I've seen a lot online about people saying, I have performance anxiety now, or, I'm struggling because I'm so addicted to porn or whatever. So are there any other tips for men that have found themselves in that situation where they're like, I'm just not sexually into my partner anymore? And how do you build those full body experiences if you are a guy that, has lived in his mom's basement, hasn't really done a lot because you've been too busy watching porn, and there's no one that actually wants to have a sexual experience with you?
That's a great question. And From my experience working with a lot of men with this, it really is about resensitizing your system. I mean, it's like both building up your vitality, because this is the thing. It's like when you're living in this overstimulated state, which a lot of people are in the modern world, everything's just cranked up to 10. It's like, turn the music louder. I need more, multiple porn screens at once. It's just like everything's cranked to 10. And it's kind of like if you go to a concert and it's just like super, super loud, and maybe you're on like MDMA and just everything's cranked up to 10. Like, it's great. It's fantastic. But then the next day, like, really your ears are they're ringing, and the sounds you hear, the music you hear, it doesn't hit you quite the same. You're just kind of in this low state because your system's just been overstimulated. Maybe you wouldn't appreciate the sound of someone just like gently plucking an acoustic guitar by a campfire, or so, just to give like this kind of metaphorical example. So it's the exact same thing with your body. It's like to kind of resensitize yourself. And this is why I think that abstaining from ejaculation could be a very, very beneficial thing for men, because it allows the hormones to build back up. It allows this sort of like sexual tension to build back up in the body, which a lot of men are uncomfortable with, that desire being unfulfilled. So when you learn to like appreciate the sexual desire instead of needing to like do something about it, let it build, let it drive you.
I wanted to ask you about that, actually, about this semen retention, because I actually have done this at certain points in my life, but I'm in a long-term relationship, so we have communication. But from your perspective and dealing with a lot of men around this, how do women usually react when their partner says, by the way, I'm abstaining from ejaculating? How does that conversation usually go?
It depends. I mean, I've been with several women since I began my semen retention practice. I'm practicing it in a relationship. I am ejaculating occasionally, but it's like the majority of the time I'm not ejaculating during sex. And I mean, I never had like a strong negative reaction from women. There was always like, sometimes like, well, why? So a bit of confusion, but I would always tell them, hey, this is, it's part of my practice. And the benefit that they got, well, both of us got, was that the dynamic of sex completely shifts, because it's no longer about, okay, just let me get my nut off and like be done with it. That's out the window. So now it's like sex, like I've had very, very long sex sessions, you know what I mean? Like multi-hours long, because it's no longer limited by ejaculation. And so sometimes, my partners really, really like that. Sometimes it was too much for them, but overall, the potency of a man who's not frequently ejaculating is usually higher. So he's more sensitive. Usually the partners, they're getting maybe a little more gusto from the man. It depends on it, but once they understand like the bigger picture, usually women are on board for it.
How do you balance what you do, I guess? Because obviously, sex is something that happens in a relationship, but then you spend sort of all day sort of talking about this stuff. So how do you balance constantly talking about sex and these kind of practices with having a relationship and, not wanting to overuse your sexual energy?
Yeah, that's an interesting question that no one's quite asked me before. I mean, first of all, I'm obsessed with sex. I always have been, so it makes sense that I would kind of go in this direction with my life. So it's not really a problem for me, because to me, a big part of this path is about transmuting that sexual energy. Like if you've ever read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, there's a whole chapter where he's talking about the transmutation of sex energy. So the whole thing is that it's this path is about more than just sex and pleasure. For me, it's about harnessing this creative energy. Our sexual energy, it creates life. We all were birthed from our parents' orgasm. So like that's the power of this energy. And so you put it into other things. That's why this is, we call it cultivation, because you're having sex in a certain way. You're building up the energy, for men, allowing the semen to remain in the body so you have enough of this potency. But it's not just about having lots and lots of sex with it. You can do that, but it's also about you're allowing that buildup of energy, that drive, that desire you're channeling that into life. Like I'm putting it into, I'm a musician. Like I got so much more creative once I started doing these practices. Like I'm putting into my business, everything. So it's like, it becomes an overflow. And that's why I keep myself busy with hobbies and like things I'm doing in the world, because it can overwhelm you if you don't have that. So it's like, to me, it's really about like your mission and your purpose is what this overflows into.
Well, one of the things that I find really interesting about this subject is if you think about all the things in the world that are the result of a man's sexual energy or trying to impress a woman, like from inventions to wars to the, so it's actually like, one of those things that I'm like, actually maybe we should be putting a bit more of a focus on this. But obviously it's not just about not doing things like not watching porn, not ejaculating. You actually teach a lot about different practices, microcosmic orbit, and so on and so forth. So for someone that is interested in this area, how much time per week do you recommend sort of devoting to these kind of practices that you're talking about?
Right. So it depends. It depends like how deep you want to go into it. But my general recommendation for men is start with 20 minutes, because there's certain practices that we do in the sexual kung fu system. My recommendation is start with 20 minutes, like a few days a week. You kind of dip your toes into it. And then for the men who like start to train in my system and are going more full onto it, the recommendation is 30 minutes, 5 days a week. So it's like, I really view it as like athletic training, like all these practices that you're doing, developing this mind and body connection, learning to feel your sexual energy in your entire body, circulating it, staying grounded, breath work, all these things involved. So it can be very casual. It could be, a few sessions during the week, and you're going to get a lot of benefit from that. Or if you're like a full-time practitioner, up to an hour, several hours a day. It just depends how serious you want to get with it. But an approachable level would be, I think, 20 minutes, 3 days a week of practicing some of these things. You're going to get some significant benefits.
And the people that find you and watch your videos and do your courses, what's typically going on in their life when they find you? Is it just they come across you and think that's interesting, or do you find that they seek you out because they've tried to have sex with someone and their penis hasn't worked and they've realized they've got a problem with porn? What's usually happening for the men that find you?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of that. A lot of just like, hey, like why can't I get hard during sex? Or there's also the I want more pleasure during sex. I feel like it used to be very pleasurable for me in my teenage years, but now it's just kind of lost that spark. But there's also often a deeper like spiritual pursuit as well. I'm a very spiritual person. I'm talking about energy and life force. A lot of people, I don't know if you're familiar with Montauk Chia. He's the one who kind of got me into all these practices. And a lot of men have heard about him, so they find out about me looking some of those things up. So the kind of theme here is that it's often men who are already kind of into some sort of self-development, but they feel like there's kind of some shortcomings in the bedroom, in their sexuality, their sexual experience, their sexual function. There's a desire for more. There's like maybe there's pain and addiction, porn addiction, premature ejaculation, erectile dysfunction. These are very, very common things that men experience, and it brings them to this work.
For people that maybe come across you and think, that all seems a bit weird, what benefits have you seen in the people that you've worked with that have adopted more of this lifestyle? Because I think there's also this idea online, especially with that nofap community, of like, oh, well, if you just stop ejaculating, you'll get superpowers and you'll start to fly. But what real benefits have you seen from people that have found you and have started doing some of these practices?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say first what I experienced, because it seems to be what everyone else is experiencing as well. Like, the number one thing is just much more fulfillment and satisfaction from sex. It's interesting because I think we all love sex. We all tend to crave it, but I'm seeing that there's more and more and more unsatisfaction around it. Like, a lot of men, they go into sex from like a state of anxiety, like, what's my partner thinking about me? Is my dick too small? What if I ejaculate too? There's all this self-judgment, all this shame. And so just being able to release those layers and just enjoy yourself during sex, like just one of the more even like surface level things, that to me is tremendously healing. Just to be able to fully enjoy yourself during sex, because I believe that sex is this like technology we as humans are meant to experience that truly heals us and bonds us together. But beyond that, being able to experience multiple full body orgasms without ejaculating, without the refractory period, which brings greater virility, better erections, higher libido, more energy in life, more confidence in the bedroom, more confidence in daily life. Like I said, more creativity. Doing this practice, it just makes you creative. It's like this is like the difference between orgasms that release your energy constantly versus these internal orgasms where your energy stays inside your body. You're charged up. You're lit up. You want to go you don't want to roll over and fall asleep. You want to go do something. You want to paint a picture. You want to sing a song. You want to get out into the world and meet people, build a business, whatever it is. It fills you up.
But I also think good for women though, right? Like, surely it's better for a woman to have a man that is interested in sex because it's about pleasure and her pleasure as well, not just about, I want to recreate what I saw in porn, or I'm doing this to get my numbers up, or even just a man coming in riddled with anxiety, just trying to get his way through it.
Absolutely. I mean, there often is this gap, between men and women sexually, to where a lot of women are not sexually satisfied. Like the majority of women have never had an orgasm. And so when they're with a man who's really like timid in the bedroom, he has performance anxiety, of course the relationship's going to suffer. It's not a judgment on the part of the man. It's like we grew up with all the shame around it. But when a man can step into his sexual power, to own it, to first, because it's first of all finding this pleasure within yourself. Like I encourage self-pleasure as a practice and as a tool to deepen your connection with this energy. And then you bring that into the bedroom, and it's just incredible. So like it's beneficial for the man, it's beneficial for the woman. When he's fully in his sexual power, she feels more comfortable just allowing herself really get into her full sexual embodiments. It's deep. It's very deep.
Yeah, no, I find it all fascinating, to be honest. I just wanted to pick up on something you said there, because I know that there might be people like me listening and thinking, wait, what did he just say? So for a man that thinks, what are you talking about? There's only one way for a man to have an orgasm, and you just told us we should be careful about doing it. What is this other type of orgasm of which you speak, and how can men experience it?
Yeah, so we grew up with the myth that for men, it's like you ejaculate, that's the orgasm, that's it. But orgasm and ejaculation are different processes. They're different physiological processes in the body. They just happen to occur at the same time because nature wanted to reward us for procreating. Otherwise, why would we do it? So coming back to the nervous system, to kind of simplify this, because basically to experience non-ejaculatory orgasm, you have to be able to develop this relaxation response. Most men have a tension response around sexual arousal and stimulation, meaning that their body becomes contracted, especially the pelvic floor region. They squeeze, they tighten, their breath becomes shallow, and it's a build up to ejaculation because they've experienced that so many times. They see it in porn, so they reproduce that experience, and that is their experience of orgasm. It's one of tension, and in the nervous system, that's the sympathetic nervous response, the fight or flight response, one of tension. And that becomes the only way you experience orgasm. So what we do in sexual kung fu is we learn to develop this relaxation response. So you learn to release these layers of tension. You learn to breathe deeply so that instead of this buildup towards ejaculation, because it's like there's this pressure building in your genitals and it has to go somewhere eventually, and it's going to go out the penis and you ejaculate. That's one way it can move. But when you develop this relaxation response, you can actually bring that buildup to fill up your entire body. So you can hold much more pleasure, much more arousal, and now the orgasm starts to move through your spine, it starts to move through your body. So it's this internal experience of orgasm as a full body buildup instead of having this expulsion outward.
And how easy is it to feel this and to experience it? Does it take like months of humming and meditating, or is it quite easy to achieve?
It depends. It depends on the person. Some men get it like right away. It's like they just need to know what to do. For some men, it takes months or even years, because coming back to like, it's like how stuck in certain habits are you? Because some men have a really hard time just letting go. That's really what this is about, is letting go. It's like there's that almost instinctual drive within us to just like go over, hit the edge, just go over into ejaculation. And so to be able to let go of that and just let go deeply, and another thing here is coming back to talking about how overstimulated we are. This internal type of orgasm, it can be very, very subtle internally, and so a lot of men are expecting to have like an ejaculation without the fluid coming out, and it's quite different, especially to begin with. It's very subtle, and you may not even notice it because you're trying to get somewhere. So when you can release that like goal orientation, it sounds paradoxical, but it's like if you can release your intention and desire to have an orgasm completely and just like be curious about how deeply can I relax? How deeply can I just like feel what's happening without trying to get anywhere else? Just like see where that takes me. So like I said, some men will get it right away. For some men, it can take much longer to do it. But there's a lot of benefits all along the way of that path.
Right, well, let's move on to some tips-based questions now. So I wanted to know, what would your advice be to someone that feels addicted to instant gratification in this dopamine-rich environment that we find ourselves, which isn't always about sex, but obviously it's one of the biggest way it shows.
Right. I think it's good to start small. It's like even something like taking cold showers or ice baths, and that's not like necessary, but that's something. It's like it's usually the opposite of what you want to do, but it has all these benefits to it. So it's like kind of allowing yourself to face discomfort in that area. Or maybe it's like just small things of discipline. Like I think one thing that's really beneficial for everyone is a little less time on a screen. So like if you can say, okay, in the morning, I'm not going to turn my phone on for the first 30 minutes or hour or 2 hours. It depends like what's kind of stretching it for you. And like that's something that could be very helpful. Maybe more practical is doing something like meditation or just allowing yourself just to like something I really like to do is just sit in, like I'll go to a park or I'll sit in my yard and I just sit and I just like listen to the birds, listen to the cars driving by, the wind, just like this stillness sort of awareness practice. Just sitting there observing without, you'll notice that your mind starts to race. You want to do things. You just start to observe. Yeah, there's the desire to do it, but just because it's there doesn't mean I need to act on it. And it could be like, I think finding consistency with something. Like for some people, it might be like, I'm going to join a gym and work out every day. Or maybe it's just, I'm going to walk for an hour every day. Just something that's like, this habit that you get into that starts to build discipline and consistency for yourself.
I love that. That's really interesting. What tips would you give to someone that wants to quit porn but is always sort of having a relapse, as they call it? So they get, they maybe go a few weeks and then they find themselves going back. What would you say for sticking with it and building consistency? What would your tips be?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is like, don't beat yourself up about it. Don't make it like, oh, I failed, I'm a bad person. It's like the fact that you went a few weeks without it, it's fantastic. Like if you were used to be doing it every day, to even go 3 days without it, that's a huge accomplishment. So celebrate that, own that, and it is a process. Like it is a process, and like I said, it's like always having kind of a plan for yourself. Like when the desire comes to watch porn, I'm going to do this instead. Maybe it's like, I'm going to call a friend, have a conversation. I'm going to go to the sauna, get a good sweat. I'm going to go for a walk in nature and then see if that impulse has changed. But overall, like, don't be too hard on yourself. It's difficult just to remove something from your life. That's why I say, like, when you start to find new things, new outlets for your life, there's something replacing that empty hole, and that will become a new habit in your life, and you may be surprised at what changes. So instead of like trying to fight the thing, it's like, okay, well, how can I redirect my energy into something else instead?
Yeah, and I guess for a lot of men, it's an addiction, and an addiction takes some getting over. You can't just always cold turkey certain things. So I also wanted to ask you about what tips do you have for men that are looking to have a deeper sense of intimacy with their partner through cultivating sexual energy? Because I do think no matter what you've said, and obviously I don't know other people's relationships, especially starting out a new relationship, I think for a man there is a lot of pressure to perform sexually and to take the lead. The idea of going in and trying to create this intimacy straight away, I think a lot of men would be, well, I can't do that, I can't tell her I'm on semen retention. So how can men go about building this intimacy with partners?
Yeah, I mean, intimacy, it's a lot of things. It's not just during sex. I think that sometimes it's like just having a deeper vulnerability. Like it could be having deep conversations. Like I'm married. I've been in a long-term relationship for 8 years now. And what really helps us sometimes attune to each other is just like have a really like just a deep, honest conversation. Like, how are you feeling in your life? What's going on for you? Where are you at? Because it's easy just to like get in the mundane things of daily life. That could be one thing, just having a deep, like very open conversation. Another thing can be just intimate touch, like giving each other massages. There's different exercises you can use, like breathing together, where you just breathe deeply together, looking into each other's eyes. Eye gazing is a very powerful tantric practice that you can use. You make it like a meditation. You sit facing each other and you look in each other's eyes and just breathe together. You don't say anything. You do that for several minutes and it can be very powerful. And then as far as during sex itself, I think one of the most helpful things maybe for both men and women is to just like release expectation. Don't try to like do the thing that you think your partner wants you to do or that you should do. It's just like, what do I truly want in this interaction? Like, what kind of sex do I truly want to create? Like, be playful, be fun. Don't do the same things every time. Something I've really been working with men on is like letting that primal animal come out, like in a balanced way. Just because a lot of men are very, very timid in the modern world. They kind of tend to constrict their true desires, and it just gets stifled in there. So like allowing that animal to come out in of course, in the container of consent and boundaries. Maybe there's a bit of conversation beforehand what that can look like, but it's like just allowing yourself to be spontaneous and authentic. And there's also techniques of like, just breathing, like being aware of like, how are you breathing? How are you tensing up? And just relax, let yourself be open to what is happening.
I can't let you go without asking about lasting longer in bed, something a lot of men want to do. So what is your advice to men who want to last longer in bed and are probably tied with some of the fads they see online about what they should do and what they should or shouldn't be clenching?
Yeah. So my understanding, having worked with this for 12 years and worked with many, many men, is that premature ejaculation simply happens because the nervous system's in a state of tension. That's it. It's a state of stress. Much like we get stuck in ejaculatory orgasms because of this tense model. So there's the direct overlap here with this as well. And basically, when you can shift into a relaxation state, parasympathetic based relaxation state, that's the like rest and digest response, which doesn't mean that you're just like limp noodle. It just means like your mind is more relaxed. You're not tensing up your body. A very practical thing to work with is the pelvic floor. A lot of people recommend Kegel exercises. I personally feel that that's the opposite of what you want to do if you have difficulty lasting. You'll find if you can completely relax your pelvic floor, free of tension, it's like next time you go to the bathroom, you urinate, notice what happens in your pelvic floor region. You have to relax deeply. Try doing that during sex. Obviously not if you have to urinate, but just if you can recreate that relaxation during sex, you'll find you don't have as much of a buildup towards ejaculation.
That's a good tip. Right. I want to know your origin story. You're leading a lot of men online. You obviously have your courses. And I feel like you're probably one of the first people to sort of put all of this together in something digestible, at least for a modern audience on YouTube. So how did you get started? What was your motivation? And what's the journey been like since then?
Right. So I feel like I should say I grew up in a small town in Idaho, Western United States, like a small farming town. There's like 2,000 people, kind of a conservative. There was like rodeos and farms, and that was the growing at the time. But I was always kind of the black sheep of the family. Basically, my teenage years, I was a musician, and I had some substance abuse problems, and I was kind of in this dark place in my life, depression, anxiety, and I got into the Eastern practices, yoga, meditation I started with, and it completely changed my life. Just dramatically transform me. But then sexuality was always a big interest for me. And I remember back in like 2012-ish times being on the internet, Googling like how to last longer in bed, and then finding about non-ejaculatory orgasms. And I read a few books and I was like, this is cool, but I decided to find a teacher to learn it from. So I traveled to study with Michael Wynn, who was one of Montauk Chia's early students, and he taught me Qigong, how to move energy through the body, and these sexual practices. And again, just completely transformational for me. Just what it did for my mind and my body, and just like dropped all of my addictions, dropped watching porn, everything, and I felt great, felt pretty good, and continued to study with more teachers. And it just became very clear to me, just like the change that I went through, that this is what men need in the modern world. Because when sexuality is no longer this source of like addiction and depletion, when you can turn it into this creative force and have a harmonious relationship with it, it changes you at a core level. And I'm like, this is what men need. It was almost like I heard this voice tell me, you're going to teach this to men, because not many people are teaching this. And in 2017, I started a YouTube channel and just started talking about the stuff because I didn't have a lot of people to talk to about it. And the interest grew very quickly, and I started putting together courses and programs, and just meeting a lot of amazing people, working with a lot of men on this stuff, just men from all over the world. And of course, that became the next stage of my learning of like the issues men were running into that I hadn't quite learned yet. Was like, okay, well, how do I figure this one out? So, later on learning about like the pelvic floor, and how a lot of the things I learned about like doing Kegels and things like that were just wrong. So yeah, it's been a continuation of me developing my studies and working with men. And I'm an intense practitioner. I spend 3 or more hours a day doing Qigong and meditation and these sexual Kung Fu exercises. So you could say I'm an addict.
Yeah. So on that, I mean, obviously you are at the top of your game on this. So I want to know, what do you still struggle with?
It's a great question. For me, it's been, I would say, a big thing for me in the past few years is really stepping into my bold masculinity. Like seeing how much I talk a lot about like nice guy syndrome, and how a lot of men in the modern world, we don't really grow up with strong masculine influence, and we're often very suppressed in our teenage years. Like, don't be so loud, don't express your anger, all these things. And so we stifle it all down, and we put on this fake smile and try to just like be really nice to get our way through life. And I'm not saying like you have to be like a bully or like physically, it's not that. It's just like, so like about 3 years ago in my relationship, it was like the attraction was kind of drying up, and I was like, what's going on here? I'm supposed to be the sexual kung fu master. Why isn't my woman just like all over me? And I realized I had a lot of these like just kind of people pleasing, overly nice patterns. I was trying to please my woman instead of like just being her leader, being like my bold masculine self. So it's something I've come a long way with it, but it's something I'm still working with, just some of these layers of like people pleasing tendencies and like not letting the world see who I really am. Especially I think being, I don't know, sex coach describes what I am, but like in my interactions in daily life, telling people what I do, it's like sometimes there's still these like layers of shame and like withholding that I'm finding. So I would say that's been a big thing on my journey recently.
Yeah, I really find it interesting what you say there about dealing with masculinity and not being a nice guy, because I really do think the sort of pendulum is swinging on that in the culture as well, and people are saying, well, actually, why are we raising little boys like naughty little girls? And actually, we need to be showing men how to step into their masculinity in a positive way. And if we're not going to do that, there'll be other people that will teach them it wrong. So actually it's about being responsible with it, but also not making them afraid of things that come naturally. And I do think that's an interesting conversation that's going to be growing over the next few years, and it's great to know that you'll be part of it.
Yeah, well put.
I had a side question, actually. So where do you live now? And is this a job you can do fully remote? Do you do a lot of traveling to go to sort of retreats and things? I mean, obviously YouTube you can do from anywhere, but what is your sort of setup that also accounts for you doing 3 hours of meditation and practice a day?
Right. So I live in Asheville, North Carolina. I moved here 3 years ago. My wife and I moved here. And so, I'm an entrepreneur. I've kind of structured an online business based around selling programs and courses. Social media kind of leads into all that. But I also do in-person events. Like I did a workshop here last month. So the majority of it's online, which is great because I can connect with men from all over the world. But I have a strong desire to get much, much more established in just like regular in-person events, because that's where it's really at. That's where the real transformation happens. And I love the people that I meet doing this work. Like everyone who comes into this is always just the most amazing people. So it's been extremely, extremely fulfilling for me.
So as we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you if there's one piece of advice or one message you hope that people take from our conversation together, what would it be?
I think it would be that I think one of the best things that anyone can do in the times we're living in is to kind of reduce the noise of their external world and allow their internal, I don't know if inner voice is the right word, but just like getting a little more back into the body, back into the natural organic senses, and less out of this external stimulation.
That's a nice message to end on. So for anyone that has listened to this episode that maybe hasn't been aware of you before and thought, my God, this Johnathan guy sounds great, where can people go to find out more about you?
The best place is my YouTube channel, Sexual Kung Fu. I have an Instagram as well, which it's been a bit. They've removed me from being able to be discovered. I've had all kinds of issues on Instagram, so a lot of censorship there. But YouTube's a great place, Sexual Kung Fu. My website is JonathanWhiteLifestyle.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Lewis. Great conversation.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.